Hey guys, today we're going to talk all about royal icing consistency. Getting this right is by far the most important thing you can learn that will take your cookies from good to great. Mastering the correct consistencies of icing will make sure your base coat is smooth, your icing doesn't run off the edge of your cookie, and your flowers and designs hold their shape and look really sharp. A lot of learning about consistency is done through trial and error. The more you practice, the better you'll get until you can just quickly eyeball it and know if your icing is where it needs to be. Let's start with the basics. There are three main consistencies that people use to decorate cookies: flood, piping, and stiff. I like my icing to be piping consistency when it's coming out of the mixer. Piping consistency is what you use for things like outlining cookies, writing words, and doing some detail work. An easy way for me to see if I have piping consistency is to lift my spoon out of the bowl and watch how the icing behaves. It will pull up and hold its shape fairly well, but still have a softness to it. It will move easily and have a soft peak. Let's move on to flood consistency. This is what you'll use to flood your cookie to get your base coat. To get flood consistency, you'll add water very slowly to your piping icing. Trust me, go slow with this. I cannot tell you how many times I've added too much water and had to go back and add powdered sugar or thicker icing to thicken it back up. It's easy to correct, but it's even easier to avoid if you just take your time with it. One thing I've noticed is that everyone seems to have their own preference on how thin they'll go with their flood icing. A common description of flood icing is that it should look like shampoo or honey, where when you pour it into a bowl, it smooths out almost instantly. I personally like my flood icing to be thicker than this. I find when it's thicker, there are fewer air bubbles, it puffs up better on top of the cookie, and I also find the color seems to look more uniform in the icing. The consistency I like for flooding is about 20-second consistency. What that means is that if you drag a knife through the icing, it will take roughly 20 seconds for the line to go away or heal. This is definitely a little thicker than traditional flood consistency. Neither is right or wrong, it's really just a matter of personal preference, and as you practice more, you'll start to figure out what works best for you. This is also the consistency you'll want if you're looking for an icing that will both outline and flood. It's thick enough to hold its shape as an outline, but thin enough to eventually settle into a smooth base on the surface of the cookie. And finally, the last consistency is stiff. This is used when you have details that have to keep their form perfectly, like flowers and borders. When you're starting with piping consistency and need to thicken it up, all you have to do is add powdered sugar. And just like with adding water, you'll want to go slow with this and add a little at a time. You'll know you've reached stiff consistency when you lift your spoon from the bowl and the icing stays in a stiff peak. You want to make sure you only add enough powdered sugar to barely get it to this point though. You could dump in a lot more and it will still hold a stiff peak. The problem though is that it'll be so thick you'll have trouble getting it to come out of the bag at all. So make sure you go slow with it, and as soon as you see that stiff peak form, you're good to go. The reality is that it's hard to know what works best for you until you try it. Once you've played around with this for a while, you'll start to figure out what you prefer. The most important thing to remember is that making cookies is fun. Have fun with this and play around, and before you know it, you'll be an expert. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. Links to products used will be in the description box below, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section and I'll be sure and get back with you. Thanks so much for watching.